To me, as a consumer-focused investor, that secretly gets me excited because I know if you can find a brand that actually has the real solution, there's a customer waiting for it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Profit to the People, the official podcast of Republic, where we believe you have the power to invest in the future you believe in. I'm Lisa Carmen Wang, head of brand at Republic, and I'll be taking you behind the scenes to meet the team, founders, and investors in our community who share their insights on the future of investing and how they're bringing profit back to the people. To learn more how you can invest, head over to republic.co and follow us on all socials at Join Republic and at Lisa Carmen Wang. Today, I'm here with Kofi Ampadu and Rashida Bobb. Kofi is the founder and general partner of SKU'd Ventures, a pre-seed CPG-focused investment fund. He's also a two-time founder and startup advisor, so he is well-versed in the pitfalls and rewards of starting new ventures. Rashida Bobb is the owner and managing director of Bricks Health, a strategic advisory firm for startups and investors to disrupt the brick walls that limit innovation and collaboration in healthcare. She's previously worked in investment roles with Pfizer, Express Scripts, and Peppermint Ventures. Today, we'll be talking about investing in the intersection of CPG and healthcare, and specifically about Femcare, an area that has been overlooked by both of these industries. Moreover, both of our guests are venture partners in the Republic Venture Partner Program, and we'll be sharing how you can get your start as a new investor and building your brand in a specific niche. Kofi, Rashida, welcome to Profit to the People.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
So to start off, Kofi, I'd love for you to just share a little bit more about your investment journey. How did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, so for me, you kind of touched on it a little bit. I really started my career in CPG. I was an operator in CPG. I was also a strategy consultant. And then when I hopped into entrepreneurship, I started a beverage brand, a beverage company years ago. Was humbled by that experience, but I knew I wanted to stay within entrepreneurship. So I'm also the type of individual that wants to compound past experiences and realized, okay, I have the advisory kind of experience from consultant. How can I leverage that within the startup space? Started advising startups in the CPG space, and the ones that I thought had long-term viability, started making small angel investments in them, and then eventually decided, you know what better way to invest than with other people's money? Got a few friends and family together and raised a small vehicle to kind of double down on my belief that CPG can get returns for investors.
And what is it specifically about CPG that makes you so bullish on it?
So when I compare CPG to what I'll call traditional tech startup in the CPG landscape, I don't think it's not a winner take all market, right? So I don't have to decide whether I want to invest in MySpace or Facebook. I can invest in a company within a category with the hopes of that company being one of five companies within that space that are successful. And me having that kind of knowledge around the landscape allows me to make bets that I think other investors may not be well equipped to make, knowing that, hey, if you think about the CPG landscape, 70% of the US economy is literally driven by people walking into a CVS and buying things like chapstick, but less than 2% of venture capital goes into the space. So it's grossly underserved. And then if you look at large CPG companies, they don't really innovate. They spend less than 2% of their net sales on R&D, which is their innovation arm, and 15% of that goes to marketing, right? So they're really marketing companies. They innovate through M&A, which bodes well for companies that are building, I think, category-defining brands.
Very interesting. Yeah. I mean, when you bring it down to just the basics like that, and just like the number of times we walk into a store and just buy stuff, that's really what drives the economy. So we'll get into that a bit more, but I wanted to just give a chance for Rashida to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into what you're doing now within healthcare and trying to disrupt those brick walls that are limiting the innovation in the space.
Sure, no problem. Well, I have a really kind of interesting, different background from most people working in the venture space. I am an operator and a strategist that started out with really traditional large healthcare companies, with health systems, insurance companies, pharma companies. But I was always that person that was in the new product side of the business. And that gradually came into interest in venture capital, corporate venture capital. And now what I do now is actually work with corporations to help them partner better with startups, or help startups actually get their go-to-market strategy, commercialization strategy, so they can become the customers that these large corporations work for. My specialty area, my passion is in healthcare and wellness, and most healthcare business models are B2B2C. So a lot of the companies that unfortunately most consumers hear about is because the pharmaceutical company, health system, doctor, insurance company did a relationship with them, had a partnership, and then it downstreams towards them, which is kind of ironic because healthcare is a people-centered business, but the money flows to other big businesses. So I really got interested in working with VC and kind of working with earlier stage companies, because I just saw there was an opportunity that a lot of very interesting, more dynamic, more innovative companies are not getting the early investment, the early partnerships, the early contracts to become a Series C large company that we will hear about. And I just love what I do. I think there's a lot of opportunity for disruption in the healthcare space that I can go on and on about. So I'll pass it back to you.
Amazing. So, I mean, as you can see, we have some experts here in two really different sectors, but there's also places where they overlap. And so I'd love for you guys just to share first and foremost, like how you got connected and what has resulted from those connections.
Well, we got connected through the Republic Venture Venture Partner Program. So I may have just pinged you off the cuff, because I think one of the things I did when I first joined the program was I wanted to do one-on-ones with each of the venture partners. And we got together and I knew what Rashida's kind of passion and interest area was. I also told her my passion and interest area, and secretly it was a selfish way for me to tell her, hey, if you see any companies that are you think would be interesting to me, let me know. And she did just that. Let me know about a company that I recently invested in this year called Private Packs. It is a Femcare product. It's a Femcare product focused on providing comfort for intimate areas on the women. And I was really excited when she initially introduced me to this company, just by the nature of my gender, I don't think I see certain deals, because the way the investment landscape has worked is, I think female founders have been grossly underserved by majority investors, which most of the times happen to be white, old guys. And so they're not necessarily approaching these investors with things that could particularly be labeled as niche, right? Although it's a product for half of the population. So when she initially reached out to me and told me about the company, I was really excited to invest in it. So to answer your question, that's how we first kind of linked up. It was through the Republic Venture Partner Program.
Awesome. Kofi and I chatted. What was really interesting, as I kind of alluded to before, there are a lot of barriers in the healthcare space. And one of the main problems I noticed is that a lot of healthcare businesses don't do a good job creating products that consumers actually want and need. So I liked Kofi's background being completely CPG and direct-to-consumer oriented. And I don't have enough people in my network with that focus. So in the back of my head, I said, okay, whenever I come across a really dynamic company that has a product as a B2C model, I'm going to think of Kofi. And Suzanne, who's the CEO of Private Pack, I really love her as a founder, and I love her company. And that's a really rare combination sometimes, if investors are telling the truth. But I have equal respect and love for the company and for as a founder. And when I find that in a founder, I want them to find investors on their deal sheet that are going to be investors that are really good for them as the company grows and as the founder grows in their business enterprise. So I found both of those in Kofi, and I'm glad it was a great match.
That's great. And, a couple stats that I wanted to highlight is that the feminine hygiene market is expected to reach $50 billion by 2027. And right now, only 4% of healthcare R&D goes towards women's health. So Kofi, you mentioned that as a man, there's a lot of stuff that you just don't get access to within the feminine healthcare space. So had you done any research on this space before, and what was it that convinced you ultimately that this was something that fit in with your thesis?
Yeah, so for me, I'm actively always looking for, I think, what other investors will call niches, right? Where I think there's riches in the niches, right? So one of the things that one of the startups that I'm actively looking for is I'm actually looking for a startup that deals with female alopecia, right? Women deal with hair loss at a rate similar to what men deal with, right? But for a woman to lose her hair, it's looked down upon in society, right? So I'm looking for who's really working on this company. And I really stumbled upon the fact that there's not enough capital or there's not enough research going into particularly the female alopecia space. A lot of women have to kind of turn to makeshift groups within like Facebook, different group chats just to kind of deal with this issue. And to me, as a consumer-focused investor, that secretly gets me excited, because I know if you can find a brand that actually has the real solution, there's a customer waiting for it, right? So when I met Suzanne, Suzanne, the founder of Private Packs, I had no idea what vulvodynia was, right? She pitched me the company, and what I do with any initial meeting is I kind of take a step back and do my own research. And I did my research and realized that what she's providing a solution for is something that affects 16% of women in the United States. But I had never heard of it. I didn't know anybody within my sphere of influence that had ever spoken about it, because a lot of times too, when it comes to femcare issues, it's still considered a bit taboo, right? I think that's changing a bit with Gen Z being a little bit more open, but it's still considered a bit taboo to talk about certain things, right? So I was really excited when I met her and I did the research and said, okay, I think this could potentially be a category defining company.
I just want to just piggyback on what Kofi said. It's so important to notice that. I work in health, and health to me is healthcare, the business, and wellness. And no matter which nomenclature you're going to use, some people say femtech, feminine hygiene. I like women's health. I think it's a little bit more broader. There's so many opportunities there, but there's a lot of underinvestment in that area. To the points that Kofi made, most of the founders are women. Many of the founders are solo entrepreneurs. And many of the founders discovered a product or the lack of solution to that product because of their own personal need. So they have a really deep connection and a passion story around it, but they're pitching to and selling to an audience of men, and often white men, but men who are older. So unless you have a man who's very in tune to the women's health market and the category of potential, you already have a disconnect right there. Secondly, if you look at a lot of the investments that's been happening in the women's health space, a lot of them has been focused on fertility and maternity, like postnatal, perinatal care. So the pregnancy aspect of a woman's life, trying to get pregnant, being pregnant, and a little bit on postnatal, but honestly, most of the innovation is around that reproductive healthcare cycle of the woman. And that's actually really, there's a lot of opportunities being left out. There's a woman when she's not trying to reproduce, who's just enjoying her sexual health. There's women in pre-adolescent time whose body is developing, changing rapidly. And there's also a very high net worth consumer population of women above age 50 who are in menopausal time, who actually have discretionary income to pay for great products, demanding that. And we're seeing a lot more innovation outside these core area of reproductive health. I would say the last 10 years, and digital health and healthcare innovation is still relatively in its infancy compared to media, gaming, other categories. The focus has really been on reproductive health. And now we see an opportunity like Private Packs and other company, they're saying a woman might need these products throughout their lifespan for multiple reasons, not just doing that aspect of reproductive health, pregnancy, before or during. And I think that's a great opportunity. There's a lot of underserved need, and hopefully it will no longer be niche. I have a few, I don't want to like dominate the conversation, but I have a lot of categories I would love to see more investment in, because there's definitely innovation and solution, but we need more investors to look for them and invest in them.
What are some of those categories?
So there's a few. I would say one is just a lot of the health conditions that women more likely have. So a lot of autoimmune diseases affect women more than men. And if you think about autoimmune diseases, a lot of women come to their practitioner or the clinician, and sometimes they're dismissed. Very often they're dismissed as it's in their head, because sometimes it could be skin changes, irritable bowel syndrome, IBS. And the idea is it's related to their menstrual cycle, it's related to their diet. It's not really, the solution is more elimination or change your behavior, and understanding that it needs to be clinically diagnosed. So there's definitely a lot of opportunity there in just autoimmune disease diagnosis and treatment, because we have seen over the last 20 plus years, a lot of women have had to find their own specialist doctors to focus and listen to them, properly diagnose them. And that's sometimes been a mixture of having a clinical, a clinician plus a allopathic or naturopathic physician to help them. I think there's a lot of opportunity also with just like earlier diagnosis and treatment of just pain, measuring pain. So we're getting very kind of more clinically and technical, but I think it's really important. A lot of the way the practice of medicine is often around, and while the way pain is assessed is all by consumer self-reporting. And it's a well-known fact that most clinicians underestimate women's pain. So I love to see anything out there that's like kind of helps either biologically or molecularly measure pain, or a way for pain can be tracked so that women can be convinced. I think there's a lot of opportunity also for, especially for women of color who are going through challenges of mental health, where finding cultural competent care for them. Also for having, helping them move their way through any health incidents they have, whether it is given birth or postnatal care or menopausal care. I think these are all areas that need to be a little bit more equally assessed. And that's just some examples.
I mean, I've read a number of just studies where most research in the medical field is done on male bodies, or sometimes on postmenopausal women, but rarely do we actually focus on, women in other stages of their life. And then, so in the healthcare system, women's bodies are treated as small men, rather than as differently, uniquely functioning systems. So Kofi, from your end, as you think about just the ways of branding this from a consumer side, so it's less taboo, what are some of the trends that you see or things that you think need to change?
I think things are changing. Change just happens a lot slower than it needs to. So I think like Gen Z as a generation coming up, they're a lot more open, right? They're a lot more open about things that are, I think, were considered taboo. If you look at mental illness, right, that's being spoken about before, you couldn't really openly talk about mental illness, right? So mental health is really important. Self-care, I think the woman's body, what really needs to change, specifically, I think, in the venture landscape, would be someone paying attention to the data and understanding that, hey, there's like literally all of this information out there. The way I like to think about it is, there's been billion-dollar businesses have been built by literally disintegrating or breaking apart Craigslist, right? You think about like Airbnb, you think about Facebook and different things. These were opportunities. The same can be done for women's health. If you literally go into Facebook groups and hear women, let's do social listening about women trying to find a solution to a problem that they have, right? Like I've spent time in different, I've spent time on different blogs reading about alopecia, and the amount of money and different regimens that people put against it, it just shows that there's like a large market opportunity, right? And a large spend. I think the main issue here is how traditional investors view market spend is against it's against traditionally how much money has been spent to kind of solve this solution, right? So if you're thinking about like women's health, people are always trying to figure out what's the substitute, right? So if you're from a CPG standpoint, it's usually if you create this product, what product are people migrating from to use your product, right? And then capturing that as the market cap or the market spend, but you need to really dig a little deeper. And that's what at least I try to do when I'm looking for opportunities of where to invest, because you have to go where the puck is. You have to go where the puck is going to be going, right? Not essentially where the puck currently is. So I think that a lot of time just needs to be spent around like investigating like women's health. Just listening to Rashida speak, in my head, I'm just like, wow, if there was a fund just focused on the woman's body, it would make a ton of returns just because of all the opportunities that are out there to actually create a solution. And then we just have such an archaic way of viewing like market size and of viewing spend data. And that definitely needs to change. And I think it is going to change as we get a lot more diversity within the investment ranks, where you have women of color, you have folks that are not currently the majority invest in. It's really going to change who's backing what, right? Because a lot of things that are considered niche are not niche, right? If something's affecting a woman's body, that is close to 50% of their population, or if not more than that, right? So that should not be considered niche.
And then we also should just speak the obvious. If you know anything about women's purchasing behavior, women are the head of households in terms of consumer purchasing and household management decisions. So most things when you're talking to the consumer, whether they are a CPG purchasing something at a retail space, or a healthcare consumer purchasing their health insurance or selecting a doctor, 9 times out of 10, it's the woman making that decision, even in the typical cis heterosexual family structure. So it also just makes sense. I do think 20 years from now, this is going to sound like a very weird conversation, a very dated conversation. Hopefully it'll be 5 years from now. We don't have to wait that long. But yes, there's just so much more opportunity out there. And just to elaborate on a point around the women's health body, there also needs to be just more participation in women in clinical trials and clinical investigation and clinical feedback. And that could be for wellness products or clinical healthcare products. And the difference is which agency actually approves it or doesn't. I think there's an opportunity right there to get more involvement of women earlier into the clinical trial recruitment and decision-making and evaluation of products.
Yeah, and also just to kind of add, I think the change is not going to happen. I can speak for the CPG side. The change is not going to happen through big CPG, right? I think the change happens with startups who are building, startups who are building solutions that are now considered niche. As they build those solutions, you even see it with like any kind of period care, right? That the fact that like organic tampons and everything else was really spurred on by startups, right? So I think what we really need is to support founders who are building things that may seem small now, but I think has really large market implications.
Absolutely. I mean, even as a woman myself, I only recently learned about the infradian cycle, which is there's the circadian rhythm and cycle, the 24-hour period. And then there's the 28-day period that women go through our menstrual cycle. And having read this book all around how just trying to operate and manage our time as women in this hustle culture, which says, you get up early, you biohack, you do whatever it is that you have to do to just like squeeze as much in as possible in your to-do list. That is actually not the way that women's bodies are supposed to function, that we have different phases throughout our menstrual cycle that can highlight different aspects of our creativity, our communication, and obviously that changes with our estrogen, progesterone, testosterone levels throughout the phases. But even I've been thinking about, how do I manage my time differently given the way my body changes over the course of the month, and feeling like, how did I go through decades of my life not knowing how to even manage that? In terms of additional opportunities that you as both part of the venture partner program, you are responsible for sourcing, finding new deals as investors yourselves. So how do you go about looking for new opportunities?
Well, I think for me, a lot of opportunities come from, well, there's some of my outreach and some comes inbound. Inbound's a little bit easier to describe. I think I've done a good job where most people in my network know if there's a healthcare startup, send them my way. And I definitely, and I've been looking at healthcare, digital health for at least 10 years now. So I'm always looking for what's new and not a repeat innovation, a must-have, not a nice-to-have. So that's really helps me kind of screen through the inbounds. And I understand that there's such a harder length of capital raise, a longer length of capital raise, and a harder hill to climb for female and women of color founders. So I do try to carve out more time for them to get them ready wherever they are, whether they need to look for pre-seed money, seed, or Series A and above. And then for outbound, this is the part, Kofi I know is really good at this also. It's balancing time and really kind of I love speaking to other founders. Every once in a while, whenever a founder pops in my head, I try to make it a little systematically. But every quarter I'll ask them, hey, I know you're doing great things in your space. Who are the other founders that you respect? And that's usually the best referrals, because I think founders know other good founders that are in their category. And then I also, of course, the accelerators, the networks, the other VC communities are also some kind of great places. And then I also just ask operators. A lot of operators get approached by companies and that want to partner or be a client or customer of their business. And these operator executives are not in that position because they're not investors. So I also check in with my extended network of operators and say, I know companies have come to you. What have you done a pilot with, or a client did you have a recent contract with? And let me see if they're fundraising. So I sometimes go that way, which is obviously a great way to find a company because they've already had clients and they're in the market.
Yeah, and to me, it's a similar strategy. So I have my founder network, right? Mentioned I've been humbled twice as a founder. So I have a bunch of founders who are in my network who either were founders when I was building or are now founders. And so they make referrals for me. And I have a simple thesis, right? I'm investing in CPG companies at the pre-seed stage, health and wellness, sustainability, or what I call specific demographic focus. So I get deals there that way. Also my investor network. So I have peer investors and then downstream investors. So with peer investors, these are investors that I co-invest with. Downstream investors, these are investors who I've built relationships with where I can pass more later stage deals to, and it becomes the tricky thing about like the investment landscape is it's sort of like, what have you done for me lately, right? So you have to always constantly be top of mind, right? And send deals. So I have a systematic way of kind of sharing deal flow, knowing what each investor likes, and kind of sending deals that way. And then from an outbound strategy standpoint, I actually got this idea from a founder, a female founder that I've been advising for a couple of years now. And the way she does innovation for her company is she reads the comment section of her competitors to figure out what people are complaining about. And that's how she innovates and builds a better product. So I take that same approach of just reading comment sections of like CPG products that I admire and trying to figure out, okay, what are they doing wrong and who's building that solution? And so doing a lot of outbound. And then lovely thing about CPG is if I try a product and I like it, right, I can figure out, like reach out to the founder, figure out, are they raising, are they at the stage that I like? Obviously, I can't do that for all products, right? If I did that, then I would never invest in Femcare products. But that's also part of the strategy, and just talking to people. Luckily, everyone gets ads on their Instagram, right? And mostly it's brands. So if you see anything, I tell friends, if you see anything that you think is interesting, that feels like a startup, just send it over to me, and I do my own diligence to figure out, are they a startup? Are they at the stage that I really want to invest in? And then share it out to my network, which includes the Republic Venture Partner Group.
Definitely. Yeah. I think it's just so important. The people that you're connected to and those relationships that you're building. And one thing I think that both of you have is you have a very strong brand in terms of like, people know that Rashida, you're for healthcare, and Kofi, you're for CPG. So for new investors, how important do you think it is to come in with a clear niche that you're focused on versus being a generalist?
It's funny. One of the reasons I think Kofi and I bonded, because we both chat about how we brand ourselves. We're both of the doer category and less of the marketing category, whether or not that's good or so. But I think, one advice for someone who doesn't have, whether or not I think you should get a specialty if you're super passionate and informed about it. I think there's nothing wrong with being a journalist, but then you find you're a journalist in a certain stage, or you're a journalist in a certain type of founder type. But if you're not, you can be specific around the industry. So I think it's better for investors to know what really feels right and fits right. We talk about imposter syndrome, but I think you might feel like a real imposter if you're doing just what you think is cool and not really what you're passionate about. And I always try to ask myself, like, an investor should be able to have a passionate, engaging conversation with a founder from the first conversation, whether it is 10 minutes or 45 minutes. And I do think an investor should, even if they're early out and does not have a specificity or special interest, they should have something they're really passionate about, because I think a founder would find that shared interest and want to continue building a relationship with them. So I do think there needs to be a little bit of authenticity to your approach. And if you're at the general phase, that's fine, but just be generalists at a certain phase or a certain region. Find some way to create a smaller pie of the larger startup ecosystem.
Yeah, kind of similar to that. And so the reason I picked CPG is that's where I had a bulk of my experience, right? And wanted to double down on it. I'm the type of individual, I want no experience to go wasted, right? So really wanted to double down on it. And it's also knowing that investment opportunities or investment positions are far and few, right? It's how can you stand out, right? And one of the things, I had a list of things on how I can stand out. And one of the things that I look for when I also invest in a company is, one, is this a company that I can actually help, right? Outside of capital, because at the end of the day, capital is a commodity, right? Like what can I bring to the table? How can I help this company out? So if anyone's starting out today, one of the things that I think they should do is just do an inventory check, right? Like what can you bring to a company? Right. So it doesn't necessarily, you don't necessarily need to say, I'm going to focus on healthcare, focus on CPG. If you're someone who wants to invest, but you're a really, really good writer, right, it becomes, okay, I want to invest in companies that I'm excited to write about, right? Where you're excited to write about, put content out about those companies. And what that does, it helps get the word out about them, right? Someone who I think he had a wealth of experience, but someone who I think has done this really well is there's a guy who writes a newsletter called Not Boring, Packy McCormick, and he essentially does long form writing. And his writing is really good and informative. And people started approaching him about, hey, do you invest? Can you write something about our company, right? So that's his niche. That's how he can help you if he's on your cap table, right? So if you're someone trying to break into VC or break into just investing in general, is trying to figure out outside of capital, because I think capital is a pure commodity, what value are you bringing to any company you invest in? Right? Unless you're investing like later stage where you're putting like millions and millions and millions of dollars into a company, your 50K or 100K check is a commodity. So you need to really position yourself in a way where you can help the companies that you're investing in.
Yeah, I really like that framing, because I think a lot of times people feel pressured because they're like, I don't know what my niche is, and I like a lot of different things, but I know that I have to specialize, or there's this pressure to have that expertise in one thing. But yeah, with that framing of it focuses more on your passion and value add, in that, you know, it doesn't have to be a specific category like CPG or like healthcare, but it's, you know, could be companies that have really great brands. And sometimes that could be a great B2B brand. It could be a great B2C brand. And, you know, and that came to mind as someone who loves branding. So it could be in any different space.
Yeah. And it's tough, right? Because when it's a scenario of beggars can't be choosers, right? So there are few spots open. And if it's a healthcare fund, and you just want to get your foot in the door, maybe you go for it, right? But at the end of the day, if you're not really passionate about it, it's just going to be hard to fake, because you have to, the nature of being an investor is you have to search through a lot of rough to find a diamond, right? So if you don't like doing the work, of talking about a certain subject, it becomes like really difficult. But if, like you said, if it's branding, if you're someone who's really, you worked in HR before and you're really good at hiring people, that's an invaluable asset to provide any startup that you invest in, right? So trying to just figuring out what your lane is and trying to double down and be really good at it, I think helps you stand out and be able to get into the space.
So in terms of just, you know, diving in a little bit more into the venture partner program, you know, both of you are there. Kofi, you have recently become a senior venture partner. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience in it?
Yeah, so it's been wonderful. For me, it did a couple of things. I had been angel investing. I've been angel investing prior to being a venture partner, but what it did was I had a limited pool of capital, right? But having the access to the Republic platform, it allowed me to, one, expand my top of funnel. So talk to a lot more founders, right? Because I was really cognizant about talking to too many founders when I was angel investing, because I was like, oh, I don't know if I have enough capital to really seed all of these companies. But having the Republic platform allows me to talk to a lot more founders, kind of share that deal flow with other venture partners. I like for me, the programming and kind of the networking aspect of it has been invaluable, where I have another network to kind of reach out to, right? So the nature of what I do is my value to companies is, okay, what do you need help with? I'll try to help you out with it, right? It's sort of like a jack of all trades. My goal is to be an unofficial headcount for your company. So when they tell me what they need help with, I may not necessarily be the person to fill that gap, but now I have another network, another Slack channel to kind of throw a request at, right? To expand my web of influence, to get solutions for the companies that I've invested in. So for me, it's been a really, really positive experience. I think Heather and Cheryl have done a great job with it. And then I think since I became a venture partner, one of the things that I've also noticed just from an equity crowd investing landscape is the branding of it. I don't know if it's because of you, Lisa, but it's really changed, right? Where before it wasn't cool to raise money on Republic or raise money on a equity crowd platform, but now it's almost as though I'm raising money to give my customers the power to be equity holders, right? And then they're also raising alongside like tier 1 VCs. So having experienced that sea change has been an exciting one for me.
Yeah, it's funny, just to piggyback on the last point that Kofi made, I've met several founders that said, oh, wow, I heard about Republic in the very beginning and the executive chatted with me and now it's so busy. So I definitely think Republic has done a great job going as an entity and getting the respect and notoriety in the ecosystem. The venture program has been really great. I think the network is just leaps and beyond better than some other, not better, but just really strong and really powerful. I think Cheryl has done a really good job at recruiting venture partners that are go-getters, that think differently and just figure things out and are very excited about what they do, no matter which point they are in their career. And I think that excitement is just really contagious and really helpful as I sometimes get on the phone with people and just say, hey, what are you doing right now? I've noticed these people are often doing 4 different things. And that's really good. That could be a founder, that could be angel investor, that could be ecosystem leader, entrepreneur in residence. And I also feel like the community is really good at sharing resources, because you think you know a lot, but it is such a fast, dynamically changing industry. And I think we as a cohort and the larger partner program have been really good at sharing resources for people who are fundraising for their own funds or people who are fundraising for their company. So I think that's really good. What I didn't expect, which has been a pleasant surprise, is how many founders are part of the venture partner program, which often gives just another aspect of, as I mentioned before, I think an investor really should just think of what value do I add for a founder? And so having other founders as venture partners, whether they are current founders and their companies existing right now, or they've sold or exited their company, or their company folded, I think that's really been really valuable. Just connecting with them and understanding how they try to approach investing, how they try to give back to the ecosystem. That's been really valuable. I've made several connections, more than several connections with other venture partners, and definitely shared deals with them. And sometimes just bounce ideas and got information from them. And that's helpful.
That's so great to hear. Well, we are very grateful to have you both as venture partners at Republic. And for those who are listening and interested in being part of the program, you can apply at republic.co/venture-programs. And this has been a truly enlightening conversation. Last question for both of you. What does bringing profit to the people mean to you?
What really attracted me to Republic and bringing profit to the people is that it's given ownership, it's given investment opportunity, and it's given an opportunity to actually share profit to everyone, and not just the smaller people in the Ivy Towers or 25th floor of a high-rise building, which are known as the elusive VCs. I think venture capital has long sat behind a veil of mystery, and a very thick veil of mystery, and now it's being lifted. And I think a lot of smart people in the world know what they like, they know what they have operational experience with, and they know what they want to invest in. And I think profit to the people is an opportunity for that.
To echo that, for me, just thinking about the traditional venture landscape, right? They raise money from LPs. They raise money from limited partners. Those limited partners are usually they're usually pension funds for people who are nurses, teachers, and giving those nurses, teachers the chance to be able to invest directly into, I think, category defining companies that they can reap the benefits of it. That's something that is mind blowing and exciting, right? I hope to see more of that just outside, even outside of the Republic platform. I hope to see change in how accredited investors are determined, right? Where it's not necessarily someone who inherited $1 million is smart enough now to decide to invest in a company, but anyone that decides, hey, I want to empower myself and really participate in this private market is able to do it. So I think Republic is doing a great service to a lot of folks who have been kept out of wealth creation for a long time.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your work, both of you, in bringing profit to the people.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
This podcast is provided for educational purposes only by Republic and Republic.co. Nothing discussed should be construed as legal, tax, accounting, or investment advice. The views of the presenters may not be the views of Republic and its affiliates. Always consult with trusted professional advisors before making investments. Private investments are inherently illiquid and may result in a total loss. All rights reserved.